العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Firstly, to everyone here, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we cover Surah Zukhruf, then Surah Dukhān, Surah Jāthiyah, and Surah Ahqāf. As for Surah Zukhruf, Allah Azza wa Jal is beginning the surah by saying how many prophets He sent in the past. And every time He sent a prophet, they made fun of the prophet. They not only made fun of the prophet, but they also made fun of the revelation that Allah gave. And Allah then gives these signs on the earth. One of the signs He tells us, after telling us about how we survive with the rain that Allah gives, the crops Allah gives to us. If you think about this, without this we would be finished. Then from there the animals we have. And once you get on those animals, Allah says, thank me. And say, Subhanallah, only Allah gave us the power to have these animals in our possession. Why? Because if you look at those animals, people who ride horses, look at the size of the horse, look at the size of the human being. What makes the horse obey the human being? You could even train an elephant. You could ride an elephant. What makes the elephant obey the human being? Allah says, وَذَلَّلْنَاهَا لَهُمْ. I made these animals come into your possessions. I made them subservient to you. I was the one who did that. Without that, these animals wouldn't listen to you. Anyhow, Allah says these mushrikeen and the polytheists who make an allegation against Allah, they say that all the angels are daughters of Allah. They say all the angels are females and they are the daughters of Allah. So Allah says, okay, you make that, but what about you when you bury your own daughters? They had this tradition that they would show their manlyhood in front of others by taking their daughter and burying her alive. And Allah talks about this act of crime that they used to do. Then Allah talks about those who came in the past with exactly the same. So He talks about Ibrahim alayhi salam. He came, he gave the message, but the same happened, which was they denied what he had brought. In fact, the mushrikeen said, why is it that Muhammad is the one claiming that he's a prophet when he hasn't got any money? He hasn't got any power, he hasn't got any money, he hasn't got status like we have status. لَوْلَا نُزِّلَ عَلَىٰ رَجُلٍ مِّنْ قَرْيَتَيْنِ عَظِيمٍ. They said, how come the Quran never came to a wealthy person, a person with a lot of status? So Allah Azza wa Jalla said, if I did not fear that every one of you eventually would give your credit to the people who have power, who have money, if I didn't have fear of that, I would have given the kafir, the one who disbelieves in me, I would have given them silver roofs. I would have given them silver staircases. They would have had thrones in their houses where they would just climb those stairs and sit on those thrones. Zukhruf, I would give them adornments. Allah said, if I had done that on this earth, if I had given certain people monies, and because of those monies, they're the ones that claim to be close to me, and if this was the case that those who have money on the earth are close to God, then you would have seen a lot of them have that. But no, money has nothing to do with, wealth has nothing to do with closeness to Allah Azza wa Jalla. Allah says He gives it to whoever He wants. So it's no such thing that Allah Azza wa Jalla has to give. He gave it to someone and therefore they're close to God. What happened in the Prophet ﷺ time is, they looked at Muhammad ﷺ and they said, well, he was an orphan. He had a very, very poor background. Even now he doesn't have much money because Rasulullah ﷺ was a businessman. He did do very well in business, but he gave all his money away in charities, in trying to propagate Islam. All his money was spent in that. So he wasn't a rich person amongst the Arabs. Now the same thing is happening today if you look at it. Because what they're saying is, if you look at Islam, the lands where Islam has prevailed, They look at these countries and they say that these are developing countries. A lot of them are developing countries. And why do they say that? Subhanallah al-Azim. They weren't developing countries. They were the most developed countries in the whole of the world. It was the Western and some of the European countries that pillaged some of these countries across the world. Africa was one of the richest places in the whole of the world. Richest in terms of minerals, in terms of diamonds, in terms of gold, in terms of many minerals that it had. Over 300 years it was literally pillaged. The subcontinent of India was one of the richest places in the world. Again, they completely ransacked the whole of the place. Now you find those Muslim countries, the Muslims are, they look at them and they say, well, these are the developing countries. No, they're not. They were pillaged. They are some of the richest countries you would have ever seen in history. Go back in history and you will see what was there. Now, wealth is not a marker to say who's on the right side, who's not on the wrong side, who's on the wrong side. Wealth is no marker at all. The truth can lie with a poor person, with a poor nation, and so on. Anyhow, Allah gives another example of Musa alayhi salatu salam. When he brought the signs, they laughed at his signs. They made mockery of his signs. In fact, Fir'aun, he stood up and he said, can this person, Moses, can he be the real messenger? Or is it me that I'm the real one? He said, this Misr, this whole of this Egypt is mine. And he said, هذه الأنهار, he said, الأنهار تجري من تحتي. He said, look at these rivers. He said, look at the river Nile. The river Nile, it runs beneath me. Look at the civilization that we have. So, فاستخف قومه. Allah says that he made a fool out of his people, and his people followed him. فأطاعوه, they followed him. Just as, what was he showing? He was showing wealth. He was showing that, supremacy on the earth is when you got money, when you got wealth, when you got power, when you got buildings, when you got real estate. That's the best you can be on this earth. And they fool the people. And you look today, the same people, I don't want to take names right now, but look at the people in real estate, with business, with money, right at the top, and look what they're doing. The exact same thing. And they're trying to move people towards their direction. But the real direction Allah Azza wa Jalla has said is of the Akhirah. And Allah says, subhanallah, in Surah Zukhruf, He says, Al-Akhillau yawma'idhin ba'duhum li ba'din aduwwun lil muttaqin. Closest friends will come on the day of judgment, and they will be enemies of one another. And they will turn on one another. And Allah then talks about the good people. He says, my servants, those who are believers, Allah says, لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. They won't have any fear, they won't have any grief on this day. Allah will say, udkhul al-jannah, you go inside Jannah, you and your wives, you live there forever. You rejoice inside there. Allah says, لَكُمْ فِيهَا فَاكِهَةٌ. Every type of fruit you want, I will give it to you. Every pleasure you want, لَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَشْتَهِي. Whatever you want of pleasure, it is yours. On the other hand, Allah says, إِنَّ الْمُجْرِمِينَ فِي عَذَابِ جَهَنَّمَ خَالِدُونَ. Those who are sinners, who turn up in the next one as sinners, they will be in permanent punishment. لَا يُفَتَّرُ عَنْهُمْ. Nothing will be decreased from the punishment. And they will then turn to the head of Jahannam. Malik is the head angel of Jahannam. And they will say, Ya Malik, لِيَقْضِ عَلَيْنَا رَبُّكَ. They will say, oh Malik, please, ask your Lord to completely end hellfire, so there's no more sentencing left. And he will say, إِنَّكُمْ مَاكِثُونَ. You're here for a long time. You had the truth that came to you, but you never liked the truth. And Allah said, this is the result of those who don't accept the truth. Anyhow, after this is Surah Dukhān. Surah Dukhān, what happened is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had many hard years in Makkah Mukarramah. And then even when he came to Medina, they still came and they tried to crush the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one day, he cursed them. And he said, may Allah give you the years that Allah gave to the people of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. Which meant Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he cursed them that they would have a drought. So what happened is a drought came on Makkah al-Mukarramah when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was already in Medina. The drought was so severe, they were actually eating bones in Makkah. They were eating bones and they were looking for any pieces of food, whatever it was that they could eat. To the extent that Abu Sufyan came all the way to Medina, and he even said in the best way he could. He said, look, these are your people. Like as in, come on, lift the curse up. Like, come on, make some dua for these people. Allah says, إِنَّا كَاشِفُ الْعَذَابَ قَلِيلًا إِنَّكُمْ عَائِدُونَ. I'm going to take away this punishment from Makkah, and you guys are going to be the same as you were before. And that's what happened. Allah lifted the punishment, but this time they were a bit different. This time they were not so antagonistic against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anyhow, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, those nations that came before, they did exactly the same thing. And again, the example of Musa alayhi salam people is given. And Allah says, كَمْ تَرَكُوا مِنْ جَنَّاتٍ وَعُيُونٍ. How many of these people, they were living in gardens, they were on this earth, they were living among springs, they had the best place on the earth. How many of them left them? And Allah says, I completely replaced them with another nation that came afterwards. And Allah Azza wa Jalla, towards the end of this surah, He mentions a tree in Jahannam. So again, where Jahannam is mentioned, Jannah is also mentioned. So Allah mentions the tree in Jahannam, which is the tree of Zaqum. There's 2 or 3 places this tree has been mentioned. In Surah Waqi'ah, Surah Safar, and this Surah, Surah Dukhān. Allah says, this is the tree that they will actually eat from. Now the fruit of this tree has got spikes in it. And they'll be so hungry in Jahannam that they will take the fruit and they will eat it because of hunger. Once it goes into their throats, the spikes come out and it sticks inside the throat. They can't take it down, they can't bring it back up. So then they want some water. And the water Allah gives is hamim. Allah gives boiling water, and they take the boiling water just to get that zaqum down into the stomach. And when they do that, obviously it completely dissolves everything inside. And Allah says, Dhuk, now taste this. Innaka antal azizul kareem. You are the one that was mighty on the earth. You was the one with all the dignity and power and might and so on. Well, now taste it. Then Allah gives a contrast of the people in Jannah. And Allah says how they will be in pleasure with their wives in Jannah. And Allah says, يَلْبَسُونَ مِنْ سُنْدُسٍ وَإِسْتَبْرَقٍ مُتَقَابِلِينَ, sitting in facing one another with the best of cushions that you could ever have. And Allah says, كَذَلِكَ وَزَوَّجْنَاهُمْ بِحُورٍ عِينٍ. I'm going to get them remarried in Jannah. There's going to be plenty of marriages Allah is going to create in Jannah for people once they get into Jannah. Rejoice after rejoice. Anyhow, after this comes Surah Jāthiyah. Now Surah Jāthiyah is a surah where Allah Azza wa Jalla talks about those who listen. First he says, look, they listen to my Quran. After listening to my Quran, then ثُمَّ يُصِرُّ مُسْتَكْبِرًا. He turns around, arrogant, proud, walking away, as if he heard nothing. These Allah is talking about the Arabs. They understood the Arabic, they knew the truth of the Arabic, they knew deeply that this was a message, not other than from something special from up there. And they turned around and they said, وَإِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِ آيَاتُنَا. When these ayats are recited, وَاللَّهُ مُسْتَكْبِرًا. He moves away in an arrogant way. Allah said, for that person there's going to be Jahannam, because they knew the truth. And what they would do is they purposefully would make some things about the Quran which were not true. Anyhow, in the end Allah says, these nations that denied the message, Allah says He will bring them on the Day of Judgment, literally on their knees, on the Day of Judgment. كُلُّ أُمَّةٍ تُدْعَى إِلَى كِتَابِهَا. Every single one of them will be called towards the book, towards the record that Allah Azza wa Jalla has. Allah says, هَذَا كِتَابُنَا يَنْطِقُ عَلَيْكُمْ بِالْحَقِّ. This book, this record, completely speaks about you, about the truth of what you did. Now, our record has been talked about in many places of the Quran. When a person will see the record on the Day of Judgment, according to Surah Kahf, they will say, لَا يُغَادِرُ صَغِيرَةً وَلَا كَبِيرَةً. This record, Allah has got this book that Allah has put together, does not leave anything major or minor. In fact, in Surah Zilzal, Allah says, فَمَنْ ثَقُلَتْ whosoever has done anything, not even in the slightest amount, خَيْرًا يَرَى شَرًّا يَرَى. Allah says, مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ. To the slightest amount of good you will see, to the slightest amount of bad you will see. Anyhow, Allah Azza wa Jalla talks about them. What did they do? These people, they made their ego, they made their desires their God. اتخذ إلهه هواه. There are certain people who say, you know what, my opinion is my opinion. Whatever I think is the best. Those people are in the most destructive place ever you can think about. Because your own mind is telling you what's true and what's not true, and you've been driven by that. Allah says, خَطَرَ عَلَى سَمْعِهِ. Your ears are blocked from the Quran, your eyes are shut up from the Quran, your heart is closed from the Quran, and you think you're on the truth, and you completely driven. Why? Because of your own self. You think your own opinions, your own mind is something driving you. Subhanallah. You know, if we don't put our mind under the Quran and say, you know what, the Quran should guide me. If we don't do that, then we're heading for destruction. Anyhow, after this Surah Ahqāf. Now Surah Ahqāf, Subhanallah, has got a few things that really stick out. One of them is that Allah Azza wa Jal sent, Ahqāf is a place between Oman and Yemen, where Ad, the people of Ad, the giants of Ad, that's where Allah Azza wa Jal sent Hud alayhi salam. So he preached them for a number of years. But they said, look, just bring us the punishment, bring us punishment. Anyhow, a drought came over them. When a drought came, they were waiting for rain. And they said, you know what, Hud, you're the one that's basically, you're blameworthy for us not having the rain right now. What happened after that is they saw a massive rain cloud coming. A nice, thick, grey rain cloud. They got so excited. They said, هَذَا عَارِضٌ مُمْطِرُنَا. This is the cloud that's going to give us the rain. See, Hud was a liar. He was the one that did all this. Our gods have sent now the rain cloud. Allah says, Allah said, this is exactly what you wanted. You wanted to see the punishment? Well, it's coming now. Allah says, رِيحٌ فِيهَا عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. This is wind. In this wind, there is severe punishment. تدمر كل شيء بأمر ربها. This wind will come and destroy everything with the permission of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Now, Allah then asks us to use our hearing, use our eyes, use our minds for the truth. Then he gives an example of jinns. What happened in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam time is that before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the jinns used to go up to the heavens and they used to listen to some of the angels' conversations. Something happened, they couldn't go anymore. So they had a big meeting. They said, let's send jinns across the world to every part to see what's happening. 9 jinns came to Makkah Mukarramah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was leading Fajr prayer outside near some hills. These 9 jinns, they heard the Quran. When they heard it, they came back to their jinn nation. They said, hey guys, we've heard this Quran, we've heard this revelation after the revelation given to Musa alayhi salam. They said, Ajibu da'i Allah, let's go, let's believe in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these jinns came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave them da'wah, they accepted Islam, and these were the first jinn sahabiyya in our ummah, which is discussed in Surah Ahqāf. And from there, the da'wah through the jinns started when the jinns came into Islam. So Allah saying, this is the jinns example. Allah said, look, open your ears, open your eyes, open your heart, and believe in the message. Please stand up for the rest.